Hello everyone, I'm Andrew Gage, this is Grantley Bernard, and welcome to It Goes Off. We've just finished round 16 and the Perth Wildcats and the New Zealand Breakers continue to put a very large gap in the rest of the field. And Grantley Bernard, welcome to the program. The Perth Wildcats have demonstrated not only can they can win playing, well, let's just say less than attractive basketball, because they shot 32% against the Townsville Crocs and we're still able to get over the line.
Let's just be flat out brutal and say they won ugly. It was chew your arm off ugly.
Well, at this stage of the season, it doesn't really matter how you win. It's whether you win or it's the end result that counts. And some big games going on around the competition in round 16. Grantley, talk us through all the winners and losers.
As they said, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose, it just matters whether you win.
Right.
It all started over in New Zealand with the Breakers 95 over the Sydney Kings 76. Daryl Corletto had 22 points on 8 of 11 field goals. He was 6 of 8 on threes. He was lighting it up. New Zealand had 58 first half points in that one. Ian Crosswhite still going strong, 22 points on 9 of 12 field goals and 10 rebounds. Cairns Taipans 85. Melbourne Tigers 71. Jamar Flip Wilson with 19 points on 8 of 11 shooting. The Taipans got home on this one with a 21-11 fourth quarter. They were 44-22 points in the paint. Chris Golding had 15 points for the Tigers. The game we talked about, the Perth Wildcats 62 over the Townsville Crocodiles 59. Kevin Lish had 17 points for the Wildcats. They did shoot 32% from the field. They were 7 of 29 on threes. Matt Knight, would you believe it, with the go-ahead three-pointer with 35 seconds left in the game. That was his first make from beyond the arc this season. The Wollongong Hawks 74 continued their slide against the Breakers 91. Adrice Deleon had 24 for the Hawks. Cedric Jackson continued his MVP form with 18 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists. The Breakers had 28 points from Wollongong turnovers. They were 14 of 29 on three-point field goals. They closed it out with a 23-8 fourth quarter. Finally, the Melbourne Tigers put themselves back in playoff contention with an 87-80 win over the Adelaide 36ers. Seth Scott, 23 points, 6 rebounds for the Tigers. For the Sixers, Daniel Johnson, the former Tiger, 25 points, 10 rebounds. The Sixers got within 3 late in the game, but could not get over the hump, and now they are in the basement.
Well, Grantley, form slumps are like saggy beds. They're very easy to get into, but extremely hard to get out of. And really, that's what's happened to the Wollongong Hawks. They are just in a world of pain. And I saw firsthand the Adelaide 36ers on Sunday, and they played some of the least inspiring basketball I've seen from a team with that level of talent in a long time. So they have got some significant issues, and it's reflected in the ladder. And let's take a look at that. At the top of the table, there is clear air, daylight between the top 2 teams, the New Zealand Breakers and the Perth Wildcats, who they are looking forward to a top-of-the-table clash coming up. And that should determine or have a big impact on who will actually finish on top of the regular season, because they won't be caught. The Sydney Kings at 10-10. Still hanging in there. The Wollongong Hawks, as you mentioned, lost 7, and hard to see where the next win is coming from just at the minute. The Melbourne Tigers coming off a win at 7-10, still got plenty of work to do. Everyone talking up their prospects, but still have plenty of work to do. And really, the only team out of contention is the Adelaide 36ers at the bottom of the table at 6-13, and the Cairns Taipans and Townsville Crocs just ever so slightly hanging on, Grantley, but the Melbourne Tigers just starting to get a little bit of momentum. Had a bit of a setback against the Cairns Taipans on Friday, but their win on Sunday was very good for 95% of it. They did their very best to give Adelaide an invitation back into the contest, but were still able to hang on.
They certainly did, and Seth Scott showed his value, as did Johnny Flynn with another big game. And, I think a lot of people probably see the imports that come to the NBL in recent seasons and, they probably haven't been great. But I think Johnny Flynn is probably playing himself into a big contract somewhere, either in Europe or maybe even back in the NBA.
Well, that's the talk, isn't it? A lot of paper talk. And here on this podcast, the number one podcast in the universe for the iNet NBL, we like to tackle some of the issues that are buzzing around the competition in a little segment we call Tick It Off. And we're going to start off, Grantley, ticking it off on the Wollongong Hawks. They've got Malcolm X have come into the lineup, and first up performance, I didn't see a lot of the game, but respectable numbers to start things off. But 7 games in a row they've lost. What do you make of the Wollongong Hawks and their prospects for the remainder of the season?
Well, you talked about the saggy mattress.
They are
right in the middle of the saggy mattress right now, aren't they? And struggling to get out. I think, Malcolm Grant did come in. He had 10 points, 4 assists, I think, in about 26 minutes. So, not Bobby Locke, but it was a decent start and probably a good start for what the Hawks need right now. I mean, they're desperate just to, I guess, correct the ship, aren't they, and get it steering back in the right direction. Having said that, though, they've got some tough ones coming up, and I think if they're the team that's going to fall out, for my money, I think it's going to be Melbourne or Townsville come in, and both those teams, those 3 teams are going to be playing each other.
Well, they are. In fact, if we have a look at the schedule, the Tigers have the Hawks twice and the Crocs twice still remaining on their schedule. They also have the Perth Wildcats twice and the New Zealand Breakers, so it's still fate.
Bit of give and take, bit of swings and roundabouts.
It is, but you'd say with that schedule, with the Hawks and Crocs still in there, fate is still very much in their hands. And then if you look at the Crocs, they obviously have the Tigers twice and still have the Hawks twice and the Kings and the Cairns twice. So the Crocs, although they're 6 and 12 and given one mighty head start, they are still in consideration when you can look at their schedule that remains. So, of all those teams, you've got even throwing Wollongong into the mix. Let's assume just for a minute, and it's a big assumption. I don't think it's necessarily going to be locked in, but let's assume Sydney are in and there's one spot remaining. Of those remaining teams, who do you like the look of the most?
I like the Crocs right now.
The Crocs ahead of the Melbourne Tigers?
Yep.
Wow,
on strength of schedule, just at the moment, I like the Crocs.
Well, they're playing some good basketball, and even in that loss over in Perth in a very hostile environment, I mean, give them credit for making the game what it was. And, it wasn't, let's be honest, it wasn't a great spectacle, but that's what they had to do in that very tough environment over there, over in Perth, and gave themselves a legitimate chance to cause a boil over.
And I guess just a special mention for Peter Crawford.
Yes.
He's now the Crocs all-time leading games played player.
Fantastic.
If that makes any sense.
And
good just gave us a little reminder of his three-point range in that game too on Friday night.
Yes.
Just a little nice, look, he was probably 3 steps over the centre line when he let it go, so you can't really argue with that.
That's the sort of range he has. But
sticking with the Tigers?
Pardon me?
He's sticking with the Tigers.
I'm sticking with the Tigers.
Big surprise.
I've seen. Oh, now come on, Grantley. Most people looking at it objectively would see the work the Tigers have been doing and seeing their lineup that they've got and say, well, they should be in the Final Four because they have the talent to be there. I actually think. And this is not being disrespectful, but
Adelaide should be in the Final Four with their talent too, but they're not.
Exactly, I agree.
But they're not.
But they're miles and miles away, and they're done. From what I saw on Sunday, they are done. They didn't have that fire in the belly and that real passion, particularly on the defensive end. So I have great fears, and I mentioned this during the broadcast on Sunday, for how they're going to actually play out the remainder of this season because they didn't look as inspired as what they needed to be. Now, Grantley, we love to get the feedback from the good folk out there. Andrew Gaze 10 on the Twitter, or Grantley Bernard, or perhaps the best way and the most efficient way is to jump on the NBL Facebook, because you can join in a whole host of different conversations going on around about the NBL. And in a little segment we call the Mark Zuckerberg Minute, where we try to address some of the questions you might have for us. And this week we're going to start it off with Annette Flynn. Hello, we've got a female viewer.
Hello, Annette. Surprised?
I'm not surprised.
Have a look at the talent.
Eye candy. And she asks, if Rob Beveridge or Andre Lamanis got the Boomers gig, can they still coach in the NBL? If not, why not? Excellent question, Annette. I see no reason why they can't continue to coach in the NBL. Over history, we've seen many times, in fact, Brian Goorjian was coaching in the NBL when he was a Boomers coach, and you go back to go way back to the days of Lindsay Gaze, it was all part of it. And so I think right now, given the international nature of our Boomers team, where most of the players are playing in all different pockets of the world, it's very hard to have a full-time coach if you don't have a full-time team and you get very little access to them. So I would think that there would be no reason why they would not be able to continue to coach their club teams.
Well, the international window is probably only about 6 weeks a year anyway, isn't it?
If that.
So it's our off-season, so you don't really need it. I mean, let me flip the question over to you, because you will probably be having a big say in who will be the next Boomers coach. So is there anything in the job criteria that says you can't coach another, like a club team, for instance? I mean, Brett Brown was assistant coach with the Spurs.
Absolutely not. I guess the only issue may be is that, and I don't think if you talk about the character of guys like Rob Beveridge, Andre Lamanis, Brian Goorjian, this would never ever come into play. But I guess the only perception issue you would be dealing with is that perhaps the head coach of the national team would be using that position.
May have a little recruiting edge.
To perhaps have greater influence over certain players to come join their club. So, but I don't believe in the reality that's ever happened in the past, and I don't believe that that would happen in these circumstances.
You're a very trusting man, aren't you?
Well, do you, Grantley, think that would be an issue?
I would just like to ask you that, is there a possibility that we may get a foreign coach for the Boomers this time? Is that on the radar?
My understanding is that no...
Not saying, sorry, that Brett Brown is, of course, foreign in regards to being an American, but, you know, we're looking at Europe, we're looking at an American coach, someone that hasn't had a connection with Australia before.
My understanding is that no stone will be left unturned to find the absolute very best candidate, and certainly no restriction going to be placed on whether they are Australian or international. You want the best coach that gives Australia the best chance to achieve their goal, and that is, of course, winning medals at the World Championships or the Olympic Games. So, so I don't think it's locked in that it can't be an Australian or it can't be an international candidate. And next up, we've got Benjamin Cornwell, and he writes, to wrap up Heritage Round, which lineup from 20 years ago would beat the current lineups? Very good question, Benjamin, and I would say most. Most. No, it's very hard to compare eras from eras. I would say this, that if you take this season as an example, I would say the bottom teams that are running around in the competition right now, the Adelaide 36ers and the like, would be better than the bottom teams of 20 years ago. The top teams, I'm not so sure. When you think back to some of the greats, the Perth Wildcats rosters, the Melbourne Tigers, their rosters, the South East Melbourne Magic, very, very, very tough question to answer, Grantley. That's why you're going to answer it.
We're in 2013, aren't we? So we go back to 1993, which was the first year
the Tigers won it.
The Tigers won a championship. So what are we looking at there? We're looking at
Dave Simmons, Leonard Copeland, myself, Mark Bradke, Rob Sibley, Warwick Giddy coming off the bench, Ray Gordon coming off the bench. Pretty solid lineup.
Yeah, so those guys didn't get to shoot the ball much, did they?
No,
but
nor should they. Nor should they understand their role.
It was still still a decent little team, and that Wildcats team you played.
Yep.
You know,
Scott Fisher, James Crawford, Andrew Vlahoff,
Ricky Grace,
Trevor Torrance, Ricky Grace. Oh my glory-filled days!
It was that was a team, and I would Oh, boy. Oh, yeah. No, I'd back those two teams in right now. As good as the Wildcats are now.
And the Breakers.
I would. I think I'd back in the. I think I'd back in the '93 squads for those two, but I'm definitely taking the 2013 Breakers over the 1993 Breakers.
Well, I'm not sure we were around then, Grantley, so that's a very valid point. Only two questions, because we've run out of time. But each and every week we give away a prize for the best question. And this week we've got an NBL prize pack coming the way of who is it? Annette Flynn or Benjamin Cornwell?
I think we have to go with Annette Flynn.
Annette Flynn!
On the Boomers coach. Great question.
Great question, Annette. And we'll try to get in contact with you. If not, give us a tingle or hit us on the social media, and we'll get that prize pack out to you as soon as we possibly can. And please keep those questions coming, and we'll try to address as many as we can. Grantley, round 17 is upon us, and it's going to be the top of the table clash that has got the saliva glands in most Hoop fans just flowing with excitement.
Yep, the Adelaide 36ers and the Wollongong Hawks.
No.
Oh, it's not.
Top of the table.
No.
Talk us through where all the action is in round 17.
Well, on Friday night, the Adelaide 36ers and the Wollongong Hawks do play, and that is the game to be shown on One at 9:30 right around the country. The big game on Friday is, of course, the New Zealand Breakers against the Perth Wildcats in Auckland. That is going to be massive. On Saturday night, it's the Townsville Crocodiles and the Sydney Kings. The Crocs can do themselves a world of good in their playoff push and do some damage to the Kings in that one. And then on Sunday, the Melbourne Tigers and the Cairns Taipans, they go into a little mini final. That one is on 10 at 2. And the Perth Wildcats at home against the Wollongong Hawks. So they've got a massive weekend, the Wildcats. They've got to play in Auckland and then scoot home to Perth to play the Hawks.
Well, given current form, they will be up to the challenge. They have been nothing short of sensational. So exciting round. Really looking forward to that top of the table clash because, as we've said, there is daylight so far between them and the rest of the field. So this could be a little entree into what most people are expecting is going to be the grand final series. Well, Grantley, it's been a very entertaining show once again, and you have just been exceptional. But before we go, we need to say thanks to those that support this wonderful podcast and, of course, the NBL. And it all starts with the naming rights sponsor, Arnett.
Connect better.
10.
And 1.
Spalding.
And far.
And Virgin Australia. And don't forget, if you want to keep up to date, the social media is just going off when it comes to the NBL. Follow all the NBL players on Twitter, or the NBL Facebook page is a very, very good one, as well as we've mentioned. Channel 10 is the home of NBL Hoops on Sundays and One on Fridays.
And a new look, nbl.com.au.
That's all we have time for this week. Get out there and support your team. Looking forward to the New Zealand Breakers taking on the Perth Wildcats. And we look forward to your company yet again next week on the #1 podcast in the universe. And it's called It Goes Off!